If you looked at our lives from the outside, you'd think we had it all figured out. A 2-story house in Portland, a tidy yard, a couple of bikes hanging in the garage for weekend rides, and 2 people who smiled just enough to look happy in photos. I was teaching 3rd grade, and my husband, Eric, ran sales at a real estate company called Redwood Estates. We'd been married 10 years, and everyone thought we were that stable couple who hosted barbecues and remembered birthdays. What they didn't know was how much effort it took to keep the peace. We'd been trying to have a baby for years. I took vitamins, tracked cycles, saw doctors, and prayed in every way a modern woman prays Google searches and whispered deals with the universe. Eric said he was fine waiting, that maybe it'll happen when we stop stressing about it. So, I stopped talking about it. Our routines became safe but stale. I made dinner. He scrolled his phone. We watched the same shows, laughed at the same scenes, even though I barely found them funny anymore. But we were fine, or at least, I thought we were. It was early spring when I noticed the first crack. Eric started working late. The first time, I believed him. The second time, I believed him because I wanted to. The third time, something in me went still. He came home smelling like that kind of perfume that costs more than a teacher's paycheck, the one you notice because it's meant to be noticed. "Long day?" I asked, setting his plate on the counter. He loosened his tie, kissed the top of my head like a politician, and said, "Yeah, clients are keeping me busy." I smiled, because that's what good wives do when they want to believe. The next morning, while making coffee, I noticed a lipstick stain on his travel mug. Not red, more like coral. Definitely not my shade. I stared at it for a full minute before rinsing it out like I hadn't seen anything. My brain said ask him, but my heart said, don't make it real. That night, we sat on the couch watching reruns. He laughed at something on his phone, a low, private laugh. I asked what was so funny. He said, "Just a meme from work." He turned his screen away, just slightly. Just enough. I went to bed early. Not to sleep, but to think. Something in me whispered that familiar line, "You're overreacting." That's what women say when they already know the truth. The next week, he got a new phone, for work security. He started locking it. The same man who once handed me his credit card without blinking now guarded his phone like it held nuclear codes. Still, I played the part. I cooked dinner, smiled at neighbors, corrected spelling papers, and pretended my marriage was solid. Because admitting it was cracking meant admitting I'd failed. Then one night, we were out with friends, other couples from his office. Someone mentioned a woman named Chloe from marketing. Eric's fork froze midair for half a second. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. When I asked later, he said, "She's new. Works under the sales team. Chill, babe." He called me babe, in that practiced way men do when they're deflecting. I dropped it for that night. But after that, the perfume came back. The late nights stretched longer. The phone stayed face down. One Friday, I decided to surprise him with dinner at his office. I packed pasta, drove downtown, and texted him when I got there. He replied 20 minutes later, "Heading to a client's house, rain check?" His car was still in the lot. I waited in the parking lot for another 20 minutes, rain tapping on the windshield. He finally walked out of the building, laughing, talking to someone on the phone. He didn't see me. I didn't honk. I just watched him walk past my car, his face lit up in the glow of his screen, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. When I got home, I put the pasta in the fridge, untouched. He came home after midnight, said something about delays with a client, and kissed me on the forehead. The same forehead he used to kiss with love, not guilt. I wanted to ask him right then. I wanted to shout, demand, break something, but instead I whispered, "Do you still love me?" He looked confused. "What kind of question is that? Just answer it." "Of course I do." He said it too quickly, too easy, like a man who'd practiced the line. I went to bed without saying another word. The next morning, he left early, said he had meetings. I stood in the doorway, watching his taillights fade, and realized something. I didn't believe him anymore. Not about work, not about love, not about anything. I wasn't ready to confront him yet, but I knew the peace in our home was gone for good. If you've ever noticed the quiet change before a betrayal, tell me in the comments. I read every story. And if you like real cheating stories and revenge stories told by people who lived through them, make sure to subscribe because this one's just getting started. I woke up the next morning and couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. That quiet kind of clarity that comes when denial finally runs out of excuses. I made coffee, watched the machine drip one slow stream after another, and told myself to stop looking for proof of what I already knew. But the universe has a sense of humor. Eric left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a shower. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. I didn't need to. But that morning, the little voice in my head, the one I'd been ignoring, sounded louder than my conscience. I glanced at his screen. His email was open. One new message glowed at the top. Meeting recap. CB. 2 letters. That was all it took. I clicked. The email was harmless, at least on the surface. It talked about marketing strategy, client touchpoints, and meeting follow-up. But then, buried near the bottom, a single line. Thanks again for listening last night. I needed that. End of Trive. Listening. Last night. I froze. The timestamp said 11:42 p.m. The same night he'd told me he was at a client dinner. When he walked back into the kitchen, towel around his neck, I asked, "Who's CB?" He didn't even hesitate. "Chloe Barnes. Marketing. Why?" I shrugged. "Just saw the name in an email." He smiled like it was nothing. "Yeah, she's new. Trying to keep up. I'm helping her with some accounts." Oh, that should have been enough to calm me down, but his tone, the practiced casualness, only made it worse. It was too smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. That night, he worked late again. I sat on the couch grading spelling tests while the TV murmured in the background. Every sound from outside the garage door, car tires on the driveway, made my heart jump. When he finally came home, he looked surprised to see me awake. "Didn't think you'd still be up," he said. "I couldn't sleep." "Oh, Vi. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied. He kissed me goodnight, turned off the light, and fell asleep within minutes. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, and wondering how someone could sleep so soundly while living a double life. The next few days were a parade of tiny betrayals disguised as normal life. Phone calls taken outside, late dinners, that damn phone, always face down. One evening, while folding laundry, I saw a new contact name pop up on his caller ID, CB Work. The label felt like a joke. If you have to mark it as work, it's already not. When he came into the room, I asked casually, "Who keeps calling so late?" He smiled. "Chloe. She's stressing over a client pitch. I'm mentoring her." "Mentoring her at 10:30 at night?" He laughed softly. "You sound jealous." "I sound awake." That shut him up for a moment. Then he sighed, kissed my forehead, and said, "You've got nothing to worry about, okay?" But I did. Because that's what people say right before you should worry. A week later, he invited me to a company mixer. I almost said no. I didn't want to meet the woman I was already losing to. But part of me needed to see her, to confirm the gut feeling I couldn't shake. The event was at a rooftop bar downtown. Everyone looked polished, loud, and slightly too happy. I was scanning the room when I heard her laugh. Chloe Barnes. Mid-20s, red hair, expensive perfume. The kind of woman who walks into a room like it owes her attention. She smiled at everyone, especially Eric. When she spotted me, she froze for half a second, then turned on a perfect grin. "You must be Lauren. Eric's told me so much about you." I smiled back. "Has he?" Her handshake was soft, rehearsed. Her eyes flicked to my wedding ring, then to Eric's. I caught it. So did he. All night, she hovered, refilling his glass, whispering, touching his sleeve when she laughed. I stood there, watching my husband perform charm for a woman who thought she'd won something. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't need to. The embarrassment in his eyes when he realized I'd noticed was enough. On the drive home, he kept glancing my way like he wanted to explain something. I didn't give him the chance. The silence between us was so thick it felt physical. When we got home, he followed me into the kitchen. "You're quiet," he said. "So are you," I answered, stacking plates into the dishwasher. Are you mad? Should I be? He hesitated. It's not like that with Chloe. She's just going through stuff. She talks to me. I looked at him and said, Then maybe you should marry her therapist. He sighed. You're being unfair. I laughed short, sharp, humorless. I think I'm being late to the truth. End of creed. He walked off, muttering something about me. Overreacting. That word always lands like a slap. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down, and scrolled through social media just to distract my brain. That's when I saw it. Chloe had posted a photo of her office desk. On it, a coffee cup, with the words, "For the one who listens when no one else does." The caption said, "Grateful for people who care." Eric had the same cup on his desk. I'd bought it for him. I put the phone down. My stomach turned cold. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen. I scrubbed the counter until my hand hurt. Sometimes, control is all you can hold on to. When Eric came back into the room, he asked if I was okay. I smiled. Perfectly fine. He nodded, relieved, and went upstairs. That night, I stared at the ceiling again, wide awake, and finally admitted what I hadn't dared to before. My husband was lying to me, and the woman who shared his secrets wasn't just another coworker. She was the reason he'd stopped looking at me the way he used to. But the part that scared me most wasn't losing him. It was realizing how calm I felt knowing it was already over. The next morning, I drove Eric's car to the grocery store, because mine needed gas. I didn't plan on snooping. I just needed milk and eggs. But when I reached for the glove compartment to grab the insurance card, a folded paper slipped out. It wasn't a bill or a note. It was a medical receipt from a women's health clinic in downtown Portland. Date: 2 weeks ago. Name: Chloe Barnes. Service: ultrasound. My hands shook. The car suddenly felt too small, like the air had turned into heat. I sat there in the parking lot staring at that single word ultrasound until the letters blurred. It's strange what the brain does when it's cornered by truth. I didn't cry. I didn't even yell. I just went numb, like every emotion lined up and decided to clock out early. When I got home, Eric was still asleep. His phone was on the nightstand, face down as always. I placed the receipt on the dresser, next to his wallet, and went to the kitchen. I made coffee, ate cereal, and waited. He came downstairs in his work shirt, still half dreaming. "Morning," he said, grabbing the mug I'd already poured for him. "Morning," I replied. He took a sip, smiled faintly, and looked up, then saw it. The receipt. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. He set the mug down. "What's that?" "You tell me," I said. For a second, he didn't move. Then he reached for the paper like it might bite him. He stared at it for a few seconds, then looked at me with that tired, guilty expression I'd seen coming for weeks. "It's not what you think," he said. I laughed. It wasn't the sweet kind of laugh. It was sharp, short, and almost cruel. "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think." He rubbed his forehead. "Okay, look. It's complicated. Try me. She's pregnant." The words dropped into the space between us like bricks. My stomach twisted, but my voice came out steady. "And you're the father?" He hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. "She told me last week," he continued, eyes darting everywhere except toward me. "It wasn't planned. She said she didn't want to ruin anything. She's scared." "Scared," I repeated, like I was trying to taste the word. "You think I care if she's scared?" He tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. "Lauren, I messed up. I know that. I'll fix this, I swear." I shook my head. "You can't fix this. You broke something that doesn't glue back." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. His eyes were full of panic. Mine were empty. He tried to explain some nonsense about feeling emotionally distant and how Chloe understood him. I stopped listening halfway through. All I heard was noise. When he finally left for work, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall clock. Every tick sounded like a question I didn't want to answer. At noon, I took a walk around the block. The spring air smelled like rain, but everything around me felt dead. I passed neighbors waving from their driveways and smiled back like nothing was wrong. Pretending was easier than explaining. By evening, I realized something strange. I wasn't crying, not even close. I wasn't broken. I was alert, focused, the kind of calm that feels like the eye of a storm. That night, when Eric came home, he acted like everything could still be normal. He asked if I wanted Thai takeout. I said sure. We ate quietly, two strangers sitting across a table pretending to be married. Halfway through dinner, he said, "She doesn't want to keep the baby if it means ruining everything." I stared at him. "So, now she's considerate?" "She's confused. She needs support. And I guess you're her support system now. I just don't want anyone to get hurt." I leaned back in my chair. "You already handled that part." He sighed like he was the victim. "That's what cheaters do best. They act tired, like you're exhausting them by existing." After dinner, he went to his office to take a call. I stayed in the kitchen, my hand on the receipt still lying on the counter. The word ultrasound stared back at me again. Proof of betrayal in plain black ink. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of it. Something inside me told me to keep every detail, not for revenge, at least not yet, but because truth has a way of disappearing when liars start rewriting it. Later that night, while folding laundry, I found another clue, a hotel key card in his pants pocket. The logo matched a boutique hotel downtown. My throat tightened, but my mind stayed quiet. I was past shock. I was observing. He came into the room just as I was putting the clothes away. "What's that?" he asked, pointing at the key card. "Laundry," I said, slipping it into the basket. He didn't push it. I looked at him under the yellow light of our bedroom lamp and realized I didn't recognize this man anymore. The warmth in his face was gone. The version of him I married existed only in photos now. When he fell asleep, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling again. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge downstairs. At 2 a.m., I got up and stood by the window, watching the rain fall in slow, silver lines across the streetlights. I wasn't thinking about Chloe or the baby. I was thinking about me, about the years I spent building something with someone who thought he could double book a life. And in that silence, a new thought settled in. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to chase the truth anymore. It had already found me, and now it was mine to use. The next day, he came home early, flowers in one hand, guilt in the other. Tulips. My favorite, or at least they used to be. He put them in a vase like that gesture could glue the marriage back together. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him fill the vase with water like he was performing repentance through home decor. Finally, I said, "Go ahead." He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, eyes on the floor. "I told Chloe we needed space to figure things out." "Things," I repeated. "Like the baby?" He nodded, exhaling through his nose. "She's scared, Lauren. She doesn't have anyone. Her parents disowned her when she moved in with her boyfriend before me. She doesn't know what to do." I blinked at him. "That's not my problem." "I know," he said quickly. "But listen, she's considering, other options, and I told her she doesn't have to go through this alone." "Other options," I said flatly. "You mean abortion?" He flinched at the word like it was dirt on his suit. "I didn't want to put it that way. End of 40. "You don't get to pick polite words anymore," I said. "You used all your courtesy on her." He rubbed his hands together, nervous. "She's been talking to someone. She said maybe there's a way to make this work, that we could." I cut him off. "We?" He hesitated. "She said, maybe you could help. Maybe we could raise the baby together." For a second, I thought I misheard. I laughed once, sharp and short, just to make sure I was still sane. "Come again?" "She thinks you're kind," he said, rushing through it. "You're good with kids. You've always wanted one. She thought maybe I'd raise her child like it's mine," I said. My voice didn't rise. It went lower, slower, dead calm. He swallowed. "I know how it sounds, but she's desperate. I told her it wasn't realistic, but you didn't stop her from saying it," I snapped. "You let her picture me playing mommy to your mistake." Audi 5. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It stretched, heavy, until even the flowers in the vase looked embarrassed to be there. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said finally. "You cheat, she gets pregnant, and now I'm supposed to save your reputation and raise the evidence?" His face crumpled like a paper bag. "I just wanted to find a way where no one gets hurt." I laughed again, louder this time. "You're a little late for that, Eric." Hit. He tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "You don't get to reach for me anymore." He looked small then, like the room had shrunk him down to size. "I made a terrible mistake," he whispered. "No," I said. "You made a series of choices. Don't flatter yourself by calling it a mistake." He stared at me, probably waiting for tears, for a scene, for anything that looked like the wife he'd been lying to. But all he got was quiet, the kind that makes people nervous. "Lauren," he said softly, "I never wanted to hurt you." "Good intentions," I said, "are just bad choices in denial." He stood there for a moment, then turned and left the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound was so soft it almost felt polite. I sat down, staring at the tulips. They were already starting to droop. I picked one up, spun it between my fingers, and thought about how something could look alive right before it collapses. That night, I didn't cook. I didn't wait for him to come home. I poured a glass of wine, turned off my phone, and sat on the porch watching the streetlights flicker across the wet pavement. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger needs energy. I didn't have any left. What I had instead was focus. By midnight, I'd made 3 calls. One to my friend Dana, who I hadn't spoken to in months. She was a lawyer, sharp, direct, allergic to nonsense. When she picked up, I didn't cry or ramble. I just said, "I need to know what happens legally when a husband gets his coworker pregnant." There was a pause. Then she said, "Oh, honey, you tell me when you want to start." The second call was to my doctor's office to schedule a checkup. Not because I was sick, but because I'd spent years putting my own health second to a marriage that didn't deserve it. The third was to a locksmith. By the time Eric came home, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Thank you for not yelling." I wanted to laugh. Not yelling wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. In the morning, he acted like nothing happened. He made coffee, hummed while reading emails. I watched him, wondering how a man could live in the ruins he created and still think it was a house. When he left for work, I went straight to the closet and started pulling down boxes, old files, tax returns, copies of everything he'd ever signed. If he thought I was going to raise another woman's child, he was about to learn something new about me. Because when I finally decide to fix something, I don't fix people. I fix problems. And he'd just become one. The next morning started like any other, except I was done pretending. I moved around the kitchen quietly, letting him believe everything was fine. He grabbed his coffee, kissed my cheek like a man doing damage control, and left for work. The moment the door shut, I exhaled. The air finally felt like mine again. I cleaned the kitchen, not because it needed cleaning, but because it kept my hands busy while my brain arranged the next steps. Anger wasn't useful anymore. Logic was. I wasn't going to scream, throw things, or post cryptic quotes online like some heartbroken teenager. I was going to dismantle his life one paper trail at a time. First step: information. I opened the file cabinet we'd shared since our first apartment. Eric never thought I'd care about finances. He was right until now. I pulled out tax returns, bank statements, and business expense reports. His handwriting was sloppy on the forms, which made it easy to spot the pattern. Reimbursements from the company matched withdrawals from our joint account. Numbers never lie, even when husbands do. I called my friend Dana around noon. She was the kind of lawyer who didn't waste time asking if I was sure. "You want me to check what happens if he used company funds for personal reasons?" she asked. "Yes. And if the personal reason happens to be a pregnant employee," she let out a low whistle. "That's not just infidelity. That's career suicide. Keep everything. Don't warn him. Let him dig deeper." I smiled for the first time in days. That's the plan. When I hung up, I started a new folder, hard copy, not digital. Paper doesn't leave notifications. Every receipt, every statement, every email printout went inside. I labeled it Vacation plans. Because irony deserved a seat at the table. That afternoon, Eric texted that he'd be late again. "Client dinner," he said. I replied with a thumbs up. No words, no fight. I think that scared him more than yelling would have. By 8, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Across the street, a couple was walking their dog, laughing. It hit me that I'd spent years being the calm half of a storm I didn't start. Now I was the storm. At 9:30, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He'd left it behind. That never happened. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity is moral flexibility's best friend. The screen showed a preview from CB. "Don't forget the doctor tomorrow. Bring the papers." Doctor. Papers. I stared at the phone, my pulse steady. This wasn't panic anymore. It was calculation. I opened my laptop and searched for the clinic name from the receipt I'd found earlier. Appointments. Patient services. Contact numbers. Then I stopped. I didn't need to go that far. I already knew enough. When Eric came home later, he looked nervous, probably realizing his phone wasn't where he left it. "Forgot something?" I asked. He froze. "My phone, did you?" I gestured toward the counter. "Right there." He smiled too fast. "Didn't even notice I left it." "How?" "Of course you didn't," I said, my voice flat. He stared at me for a moment, then mumbled something about being tired and went upstairs. After he fell asleep, I sat at my desk with a legal pad and started listing everything I'd need. Bank account access, copies of his pay stubs, a diary contact at Redwood Estates, screenshots of texts, the receipt. It wasn't rage fueling me anymore. It was clarity. For years, I'd been playing defense, keeping peace, avoiding conflict, trusting that love could outlast stupidity. Now, I was on offense, and he didn't even know the game had started. The next morning, I woke up before him and made breakfast. I wanted normalcy, or at least the illusion of it. He came downstairs, surprised to see pancakes. "Trying to start fresh?" he joked. I looked up and smiled. "Something like that." "Oh." He sat down, started eating, and said, "Chloe's thinking about transferring departments. It might be for the best." I nodded. "Probably." He relaxed, like we were partners again. The man actually believed calm meant forgiveness. He didn't realize it meant preparation. When he left for work, I opened the front door and watched him drive away, my coffee steaming in the morning air. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't scared. I was focused. I called Dana again that afternoon. "What's the best way to document misuse of company funds?" She laughed. "You're not wasting time, huh? Wasting time is how I got here." She told me exactly what to gather, how to categorize, and where to send it anonymously if I wanted HR to open an investigation. I wrote everything down, word for word. By the time the sun went down, my folder was thicker, my nerves calmer. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It needed to be organized. Later that night, Eric came home humming. "Good day?" I asked. "Better," he said. "I think things are finally smoothing out." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure they are." He leaned down to kiss my head. "You okay?" "Perfectly fine." And I was. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting to his choices. I was making mine. The first real explosion didn't come from me, it came from the internet. It started on a Thursday morning. I was getting ready for work when my phone buzzed non-stop. Group chats, coworkers, even my neighbor sent me the same link. It was Chloe. She'd posted a glowing photo of herself in a tight dress, one hand on her belly, captioned, "Blessed to be loved by someone brave enough to choose me." I didn't need a DNA test to know who that someone was. I stared at the photo, thumb hovering over the screen. The comments were full of congratulations, heart emojis, people tagging each other with, "Finally," and "They're perfect together." It was surreal watching strangers celebrate my humiliation in real time. By the time I got to work, whispers had already made their way through the teacher's lounge. Portland isn't small when gossip travels on Wi-Fi. I smiled through it, graded papers, and taught fractions like my life wasn't dividing itself into pieces. That night, when Eric came home, I was waiting at the dining table with the lights on. "Did you see the post?" I asked. He froze. What post? I turned the screen toward him. The color drained from his face. She said that? He whispered. She said it, she tagged you, and she left the comments open. Do you want to guess how many of your coworkers saw it before HR did? He rubbed his temples. She promised she wouldn't. Stop talking about promises, I said. You already used up that word. He looked at me like a man who'd run out of explanations. I told her to be discreet. I almost laughed. You can't be discreet about a pregnancy, Eric, especially not one you caused. He sank into a chair, shoulders slumped. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. No, I said quietly. You were supposed to keep your lies cleaner. He looked up. Lauren, please, HR is going to find out. I could lose my job. My career. Your career? I repeated, nodding. Right. Because that's the tragedy here. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was final. Something between us snapped, soundlessly. For the next few days, the house felt like a waiting room before disaster. He moved around carefully, as if loud noises might trigger me. But I didn't yell. I cooked, went to work, came home, and kept my calm. That calm terrified him. He didn't know it was the quiet that comes before a storm you build yourself. Saturday morning, Chloe showed up. Yes, at my house. I opened the door expecting a delivery, and there she was, pregnant belly, designer handbag, the nerve of a woman who thought she'd won. Lauren, she said, her voice too soft for what she came to do. I think we should talk. I leaned on the doorframe. Should we? She glanced around, lowering her tone. I didn't mean for things to get messy. Eric's confused. He doesn't know what he wants. Itilda Mahil. You came all the way here to tell me my husband's confused? She sighed, trying to sound mature. You're both adults. You could help each other. This doesn't have to get ugly. That word ugly did it. I stepped closer. You think you can come to my house, stand on my porch, and talk about not making things ugly while carrying my husband's child? She blinked fast, clearly not used to people who don't play polite. I just thought maybe we could be civil. I too. Oh, honey, I said, lowering my voice. You mistake silence for civility. I've been quiet because I was deciding what kind of woman I want to be when this ends. And I've decided I'm not the kind who competes with the help. Her lips parted. Excuse me? I smiled. You heard me. Now get off my porch. She hesitated, then turned, muttering something about how I'd regret being cruel. I shut the door behind her and locked it, the click echoing like punctuation. Eric came home later that evening. I didn't mention her visit, neither did he. The silence between us had evolved into something almost clinical. He was the subject. I was the scientist observing decay. Sunday night, he tried to talk again. You humiliated her, he said quietly. I looked up from my laptop. She came to my house, pregnant, with your child. What reaction were you expecting? A baby shower invitation? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. Let me make this simple, I said. If she wants to play mother, she can do it without your company benefits. And if you want to keep your job, you better pray Redwood doesn't check your expense reports. He finally looked at me, alarm flashing in his eyes. What did you do? Nothing, I said, taking a sip of wine. Yet, he didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing downstairs, making phone calls, whispering. Panic was starting to settle in, and it sounded beautiful. When Monday came, I packed my bag for work, left the house early, and stopped by the post office. I mailed a thick, neatly organized envelope, no return address to Redwood Estates HR department. Inside, copies of receipts, transfers, and emails linking company money to personal support for employee C. Barnes. By the time Eric reached the office, the wheels were already turning. I didn't text him. I didn't need to. Some storms announce themselves without thunder. The morning after I sent that envelope, I woke up before dawn. I made coffee, fed the cat, and sat at the kitchen table waiting for the sun to come up. The air in the house felt cleaner somehow, like it was finally free of his lies. Eric left early. Tu claimed he had a conference call. He didn't know that his version of order was already unraveling one piece of paper at a time. At 8:15, My phone buzzed. It was Dana. "You did it?" she asked. "Dropped it in the mail yesterday." "Dan." She laughed softly. "Good. HR will eat that up. Affairs inside a company like Redwood are like termites, you don't see them until the floor collapses." I smiled, sipping my coffee. "Then we'll just wait for the wood to give out." That day, I went about my usual schedule, like nothing was wrong. At school, I taught the kids about state capitals while my own life was about to redraw its map. Between classes, I checked my phone not for texts from him, but for updates from Dana. Nothing yet. That kind of silence was a good sign. When I got home, Eric was already there, sitting on the couch, staring at his laptop. He looked like a man waiting for an execution he couldn't name. "You're home early," I said. He looked up quickly. "Yeah, just slow day. Or maybe a busy one for someone else." He squinted, clearly thrown off. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." He studied me like I was a puzzle he'd once solved and forgot how. Then he shut his laptop and said, "You're acting strange lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" "Calm. It's unnerving." "Maybe I finally learned it from you," I said, walking past him. He didn't respond. He couldn't. By Friday, Redwood's HR department had received the documents. Dana confirmed it that afternoon. They opened an internal audit. If he's been moving company money around, they'll find it fast. You just sit tight and act normal. Normal. The word had become foreign, but I could fake it better than anyone. Saturday morning, I noticed Eric pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "Everything okay?" I asked, like a polite stranger. He didn't answer right away. HR called a meeting for Monday. They said it's about expense reporting inconsistencies. I bit back a smile. "That sounds serious?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, someone must have made a mistake somewhere." "Someone," I repeated. "Imagine that. And for note." He looked at me suspiciously, but before he could say anything, his phone buzzed. Chloe again. I didn't look, but I could tell by his tone, short, anxious, almost pleading, that things weren't good between them. Whatever fantasy they'd built was starting to rot under real-world pressure. That evening, I took a walk to clear my head. The neighborhood was calm, houses glowing in warm light, people cooking dinner, kids chasing each other in driveways. For a moment, I felt normal again. Then I realized I wasn't part of that piece. I was rebuilding my own version of it. When I got back, Eric was sitting at the table with a drink. "I think someone's trying to sabotage me," he said. I poured myself a glass of water. "Why do you think that?" "Anonymous documents, false claims. They said there were personal transactions tied to an employee. I know it's about Chloe." "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," I said, keeping my tone soft. He looked at me carefully. "You'd tell me if you knew something, right?" I met his eyes. "Of course. That's what honest couples do." He studied my face for another second, then looked away. He wanted to believe me so badly, it almost made me pity him. Almost. Sunday came and went quietly. He barely slept. I could hear him moving through the house at night, muttering to himself, checking emails, pacing like a trapped animal. Meanwhile, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Monday morning, he put on his best suit, the one he used to wear for client presentations. I watched him adjust his tie in the mirror, his hands trembling slightly. "Wish me luck," he said. "Good luck," I replied, then added, "You'll need it." When the door closed, I sat down at my desk and opened my notebook. There it was, every detail, every date, every transaction. The pattern was perfect. I didn't even need to show my hand anymore. The game was already rigged by his own carelessness. At noon, Dana texted. They called both of them in. "He looks pale. She looks like she just realized her paycheck's about to vanish." I smiled. "Justice," I whispered. "The quiet kind." At 3 p.m., Eric called. His voice was flat. "They're suspending me. Pending investigation." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, because it was the polite thing to say. "They said there's proof," he muttered. "Receipts? Transfers? I don't even remember half of it." "Memory can be selective," I replied. "You used to forget our anniversary, too." He didn't answer, just breathing. Then he said, "You're not surprised." I'm a teacher, Eric. I've seen actions and consequences. They usually match. He hung up. That night, he came home silent. No tie, no confidence, no eye contact. He poured himself a drink, didn't say a word. I didn't either. The power of silence was doing the work for me. Later, while washing dishes, I looked out the window and saw him sitting alone on the porch, staring into nothing. The same man who once controlled every conversation was now speechless. I didn't feel victory. I felt balance returning. And balance, I realized, was better than revenge. But balance can't exist without truth, and I still had more of it to deliver. Tuesday morning, the world looked perfectly ordinary blue sky. Birds on the fence, mail truck passing by. You wouldn't guess someone's career was about to implode before lunch. Eric left early, trying to look confident in that same navy suit, the one I'd ironed years ago for his first big promotion. He didn't realize the symbolism wearing his old victory uniform to his own execution. I watched from the window as he backed out of the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might save him. Then I went to work. Taught spelling, read Charlotte's Web, handed out gold star stickers. Normalcy has always been the best disguise. Around 11 a.m., Dana texted. They're meeting now. HR, legal, him, Chloe. I didn't respond. I didn't need a play-by-play. I could already picture the scene. A sterile boardroom, glass walls, HR faces neutral but hungry. Chloe probably tried to look composed, but had that nervous smile the kind women wear when they think manipulation will save them. And Eric, I knew that look too. The blank stare of a man realizing his secret world is collapsing under fluorescent lighting. At noon, Dana texted again. It's bad. They have everything. You really did your homework. That made me laugh. Homework was one thing I was always good at. When I got home, Eric's car was already in the driveway. He was sitting inside, engine off, hands still on the wheel. He looked like he'd aged 5 years since breakfast. I opened the door and leaned down. Rough day? He blinked. Slow. They suspended me. HR said they're reviewing misuse of company funds and ethical violations. I might lose my position. Might? I asked. He ignored that. Chloe got fired on the spot. They said it was for policy breach. Sounds like a productive meeting, I said. He stared at me like I was supposed to console him. Lauren, this isn't funny. My career. Eric, your career slept with a subordinate. I'd say the punishment fits. He flinched. You don't understand how much I've worked for this. No, I understand exactly. You worked for it. Then you worked your way out of it. He ran a hand through his hair, voice shaking. They said they might contact me for further questioning. Legal might get involved. Chloe's threatening to sue for wrongful termination. I raised an eyebrow. Wrongful termination? She had an affair with her boss and used company money to rent an apartment. What's she going to claim wrongful exposure? He didn't answer, just stared at the floor like the tiles might give him a way out. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and said casually, You should get some rest. You look like someone who just met karma in a conference room. He glared at me. You think this is a joke? No, I said, turning to him. I think it's justice finally on the clock. That night, he didn't eat. He just sat on the couch, scrolling through emails, watching his empire crumble, one message at a time. I sat across from him, grading papers. The sound of my pen scratching across paper was the only rhythm in the room. Around 10, he broke the silence. They asked if I wanted to resign quietly. And? I said no. I told them I'd fight it. Fight what exactly? The receipts? The hotel payments? The baby? He glared at me, eyes sharp. You think you're better than me? Oh? I met his stare evenly. No, I know I am. Because I didn't destroy a marriage and a career in the same fiscal quarter. He stood abruptly, pacing. You don't get it. You're enjoying this. I'm not enjoying it, I said, standing too. I'm just not wasting sympathy on someone who earned their own downfall. He went quiet, jaw tight. Then he said something I'll never forget. You're cold. Maybe, I said. But you taught me how. He slept in the guest room that night. Or tried to. I could hear him moving around, muttering, checking his phone every 10 minutes. Guilt doesn't let people rest. The next morning, the world moved on like nothing happened. But inside that house, everything had shifted. He didn't hum while shaving anymore. Didn't talk about work. Didn't look me in the eye. By midweek, news had started to spread beyond the office. Redwood scandal was floating around local gossip boards. A friend from a nearby firm texted me, "Hey, isn't that your husband's company?" I typed back, "Was," then put my phone face down. Thursday, Dana called again. "They're cutting him loose. Official termination package incoming. No reference letter." "Good," I said. "Maybe he can start a new career teaching ethics." She laughed. "You're ruthless, Lauren." "No," I said softly. "I'm just done being kind to people who confuse kindness with weakness." That night, Eric came home later than usual. He smelled like whiskey and regret. "They fired me," he said, voice hoarse. I nodded. "Then it's finally official." He looked at me for a long moment, eyes full of something between apology and disbelief. "I never thought you'd stop loving me." I smiled faintly. "You never thought I'd stop forgiving you. There's a difference." He didn't answer. He just sat down on the floor, back against the wall, looking like someone who finally understood what irreversible means. I turned off the lights and went upstairs without another word. In the quiet darkness of my bedroom, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad either. What I felt was distance, clean, quiet, and earned. Some people think revenge is about destruction, but sometimes it's just about letting the truth finish what you started. The following week, the silence in the house had a new sound to it: defeat. Eric barely spoke. The TV stayed off. Even the cat avoided him. It was like the universe itself decided to mute him for a while. He spent his days on the phone, pretending to sound confident as he called old colleagues, trying to line up interviews. But no one was calling back. The news had already made the rounds. Redwood's internal ethics breach was the kind of scandal that spread faster than truth ever could. On Tuesday, I found him sitting at the dining table, surrounded by papers, termination documents, severance details, HR letters stamped confidential. He looked up as I walked in, eyes bloodshot. "They gave me 6 months severance," he said, voice hollow, "and told me not to apply for rehire." I nodded. "That's generous, considering." He flinched. "Do you have to be so cold about this? Do you have to pretend you didn't bring it on yourself?" He stood, pacing. "You think I don't regret it? You think I'm not paying for it every second?" I leaned against the counter. "Regret doesn't erase consequences. It just makes you quieter while they happen." He sank back into the chair, head in his hands. "I ruined everything." "Not everything," I said. "You still have your health, your car, and the woman who thought she could build a family on someone else's foundation." He looked up sharply. "You know she had the baby?" I paused. "When?" "Last week. Early delivery. Complications. She sent me a message asking for help. Did you answer?" Hay hesitated. "No." That silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. For the first time, I believed he might actually understand the weight of what he'd done, not the cheating, not the firing, but the emptiness that follows when you lose the last person willing to look at you with trust. By Friday, the phone stopped ringing. He wasn't even pretending to job hunt anymore. He just stayed home, drifting from room to room, like a ghost haunting his own life. Meanwhile, I kept moving. Work, errands, dinners with friends who didn't ask too many questions. I was rebuilding quietly, piece by piece. Then, one evening, he came into the kitchen holding an envelope. "I can't stay here," he said. I looked up from my laptop. "No argument here. I'll sign the house over to you. You deserve it." That caught me off guard. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I can't afford it anyway. You should have something stable." It was the first selfless thing he'd said in months. I studied him for a moment. His face looked older now, less arrogant, more human. The fall had stripped him of everything except the truth. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll go through Dana for the paperwork." He nodded again, eyes on the floor. "Thank you." We spent the next week dividing things. Furniture, bank accounts, memories. Every item came with a ghost. The wedding photo. The mugs from our first vacation. The framed print that said, Love Builds Homes. I almost laughed when I packed that one. One night, while sorting through boxes, I found a shoebox full of old letters. The kind we used to write before email replaced sincerity. I skimmed one where he'd written, "You're my calm place in a loud world." I folded it back up and put it in the trash. By the time the papers were signed, he was living in a small apartment across town. I didn't visit, but I heard from Dana that he was trying to stay sober, job hunting, keeping to himself. And Chloe? She was out of work, living with her sister, apparently struggling as a new mother. Rumors said she'd tried to contact Eric again, asking for help. He ignored her messages this time. One afternoon, I ran into someone from Redwood while picking up coffee. A woman from HR. She looked uncomfortable, but curious. "Lauren," she said, "I just wanted to say, we all heard what happened. You handled it with so much grace." "Grace," I repeated. "That's one word for it." She smiled awkwardly. "He wasn't the first, you know. Affairs like that never stay buried." "I know," I said. "But I made sure this one didn't die quietly." Driving home, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't hate Eric anymore. I didn't love him either. He'd become a lesson, not a wound, and lessons don't hurt once you learn them. That night, he called. It was the first time in weeks. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For not destroying me completely." I laughed quietly. "Oh, Eric, you did that all by yourself." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Take care of yourself, Lauren." "I already am," I said, and hung up. I stood by the window for a long while after that, watching the streetlights flicker over the wet road. The city hummed, steady and distant, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't victory, it wasn't forgiveness, it was just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized the truth. Sometimes you don't need to burn someone to the ground, you just let them live long enough to see what they've lost. The day the divorce papers arrived, I didn't cry. I just signed them, slipped them into a manila envelope, and handed them to the courier like I was mailing a bill. 10 years of marriage, folded into a few signatures and a stamp. It didn't feel tragic anymore, it felt finished. After that, I packed what mattered. My books, a few photos that didn't lie, and the coffee mug that actually belonged to me. The rest, his suits, our wedding china, the furniture we picked out during our forever phase, stayed behind. I didn't want souvenirs from a life I'd already outgrown. I moved north to Seattle. Small apartment, quiet street, view of the lake if I leaned out far enough. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I bought secondhand furniture, mismatched dishes, and a cheap rug that smelled like new beginnings. For the first few nights, I slept with the windows open just to hear the sound of the city breathing. At work, I took a new teaching job at a private school. Smaller classes, better pay, no one knew my story. I liked that anonymity. It felt like erasing a chalkboard. Every morning, I walked to a corner cafe near the school. Same barista, same routine. One day, she asked if I wanted the usual, and for some reason, that small recognition felt like progress, like I existed again. I started journaling at night, just simple thoughts at first, then longer reflections about what had happened, how betrayal changes not just how you see love, but how you see yourself. I didn't write to heal. I wrote to remember what clarity felt like. A few weeks later, I turned those entries into short audio recordings. I didn't plan to share them, but Dana insisted. "Lauren," she said, "you've got this voice people will listen to. You sound like someone who's survived." She wasn't wrong. I uploaded the first episode to a podcast platform under the title The Kind of Love That Doesn't Lie. I didn't expect anyone to hear it. It was just me, my microphone, and a glass of wine. But by the end of the week, there were thousands of plays. Messages poured in, women, men, even a few teenagers telling me they'd been through something similar. "You said what I couldn't say out loud," one wrote. "Thank you for making me feel less stupid." That's when I realized the story I thought had broken me had turned into something else entirely. It was no longer about what Eric did to me, it was about what I chose to do after. One night, as I was recording a new episode, I heard the rain start outside, soft, steady, familiar. I paused the mic and just listened. For years, rain had been a reminder of everything heavy. Now, it sounded clean. The next day, my principal called me into her office. "You're popular," she said, smiling. "Half the staff is listening to your podcast. You ever think about public speaking?" I laughed. "I've barely figured out how to speak privately." Still, she invited me to give a talk at the school's community event. The theme was resilience. Oh. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a blank page. What could I possibly say to a crowd about resilience without sounding like a walking self-help cliché? Then it hit me, resilience wasn't about strength. It was about staying soft in a world that rewards hardness. It was about learning when to walk away quietly instead of exploding. The event was small: parents, teachers, students, but when I spoke, the room went still. I told them about starting over, not by rebuilding what was lost, but by building something entirely new. When I finished, people clapped, not out of sympathy, but out of recognition. They'd been there too, in their own ways. Afterward, a man from the local paper approached me. "That podcast of yours," he said, "you ever thought about turning it into a column?" I smiled. I'm learning not to say no to new beginnings. Arlie. Weeks passed, and life fell into a rhythm that didn't depend on anyone else's chaos. Saturdays became my favorite day: laundry, grocery store, long walks by the lake. Sometimes I'd see couples arguing in cars and feel nothing but relief that I wasn't part of that soundtrack anymore. Dana visited one weekend. She looked around my small but tidy apartment and said, "You look happy." "I am," I said. "For the first time, I'm not trying to fix anything. Ollie." We drank wine on the balcony until midnight, talking about everything except the past. When she left, I looked at the empty glass on the table and realized how still the world had become when you stop chasing closure. A few days later, I checked my podcast stats: over 100,000 listeners. Someone had even written an article online. The Teacher Who Turned Betrayal into Empowerment. I read it twice, mostly in disbelief. It wasn't fame I wanted. It was proof that pain could be recycled into something useful. I didn't think about Eric much anymore. Occasionally his name would pop up in a headline about the Redwood scandal, or a mutual friend would mention seeing him around Portland. He'd become a ghost: quiet, harmless, irrelevant. That night, while editing my next episode, I caught my reflection in the laptop screen. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman looking back. She didn't flinch, she didn't apologize. She just looked peaceful. And that's when I realized starting over isn't about changing your life. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you stopped listening to. It was a Tuesday morning when I opened my inbox and saw her name, Chloe Barnes. For a second, I thought it was spam, maybe some automated message that slipped through filters. But the subject line made my stomach tighten. I don't know who else to ask. I sat there, staring at it, fingers hovering over the trackpad. I almost deleted it without opening. Then curiosity won. "Lauren, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. You have every reason to hate me. But please, this isn't about the past. It's about my baby. He's sick. Congenital heart issue. The doctor said he needs surgery soon and I can't afford it." Eric disappeared. I don't even know where he is anymore. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just help. Anything. Please. I do. I read it 3 times, not because I cared about her excuses, but because of that one word, please. The irony of it almost made me laugh. The woman who once stood on my porch, smug and glowing, now begging from behind a screen. I closed the laptop and went about my day. Made coffee, drove to work, taught classes, smiled when I needed to. But that email kept replaying in the back of my mind, like a song I didn't choose. That evening, while editing a new podcast episode, I found myself thinking about her baby, the innocent part of all this. None of it was his fault. He didn't ask to be born into someone else's mess. I shut the laptop again and sat in the quiet. The rain had started outside, soft against the glass. It sounded like it always did, steady, familiar, cleansing. I didn't owe her anything. Not money, not compassion, not a single word. But I also knew something she clearly didn't. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't watching someone suffer, It's choosing not to let their chaos infect your peace. So, I made a decision. The next day, I called the hospital listed in her email. I asked about an infant named Noah Barnes. The nurse confirmed the case serious but treatable, surgery scheduled within weeks. I hung up, logged into my bank account, and sent an anonymous donation to cover the hospital bill. No note, no name, just a transaction ID and silence. When I was done, I closed my computer, made myself tea, and went out to the balcony. The air was cold and clean. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't charity either. It was closure delivered quietly, without witnesses or applause. That weekend, Dana came by for dinner. She poured herself a glass of wine and asked how things were going. "I got an email from Chloe," I said. Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh no. What does she want now?" "Money. For her kid's surgery." "And you said?" "I helped." She nearly dropped her glass. "You what?" "Anonymous donation," I said simply. "The baby doesn't deserve to pay for their mistakes." Dana stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "You're a better person than I am." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm just tired of keeping score." She leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "You realize you've turned into the kind of woman men write essays about after they screw up, right?" I laughed softly. "Then let them write. Maybe they'll learn something this time." After dinner, I walked her to her car. The street was quiet, a few porch lights glowing down the block. She hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I'm proud of me too," I replied. When I went back inside, I saw the email still sitting in my inbox, unread but unanswered. I didn't delete it. I just moved it to a folder labeled Done. 2 weeks later, I received another message, this time from the hospital. It was an automated receipt confirming the funds had been processed. The surgery had gone well. No complications. I sat there, staring at those words, feeling something warm spread through me. Not happiness exactly, more like relief. The kind that doesn't need an audience. Later that evening, I recorded another podcast episode. This one wasn't about betrayal or revenge. It was about release. I spoke softly into the mic. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from knowing you could destroy someone, but you don't. It's not weakness, it's power disguised as mercy. And mercy doesn't mean forgetting, it just means you've stopped bleeding from the same wound. When I hit stop, I didn't even bother editing. The words felt right as they were, raw, unpolished, real. The next morning, I posted it online and went for a walk by the lake. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. Couples passed by, joggers waved, life moved forward. My phone buzzed halfway through the walk. It was an email notification, listener feedback. "I've been through the same thing," one woman wrote. "Your words made me realize that healing isn't about revenge, it's about getting my life back. Thank you." I smiled, sliding the phone into my pocket. The truth was, I hadn't set out to help anyone else. But somehow, by rebuilding my life brick by brick, I'd given others a blueprint. When I got home, I made breakfast, turned on soft music, and opened the curtains. The city stretched wide and quiet before me, new, forgiving, alive. Somewhere out there, Chloe was probably holding her baby. Eric was probably trying to rebuild whatever was left of himself. And me? I was just living again. No anger, no revenge, no ghosts. Just peace. The kind you don't ask for, you earn it. The rain returned the following week, steady and unhurried, washing the streets outside my apartment clean. I was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, watching droplets slide down the glass, when it hit me how long it had been since I'd woken up without heaviness in my chest. No waiting for someone's text, no second-guessing what silence meant, just quiet, real quiet. I didn't plan for life to turn out like this. I didn't imagine divorce papers, scandal headlines, or anonymous donations to a woman who once called me the problem. But life rarely asks what you plan, it just watches how you handle what falls apart. At work, my students had started calling me Miss M instead of Mrs. Mitchell. The first time it happened, I flinched a little. Then I realized it felt right. The name didn't sound like loss anymore. It sounded like freedom. My podcast kept growing, though I never marketed it. People shared it because they felt seen, not because it was trendy. Listeners wrote me letters, real ones, on paper telling me they'd left bad marriages, faced down old fears, or just stopped apologizing for taking up space. I kept every letter in a box under my bed, not out of pride, but because every story was proof that even broken things could echo in beautiful ways. One evening, my principal asked if I'd stay late for a parent-teacher event. After the meeting, a woman approached me, a mom in her 40s, shy smile, eyes tired but kind. "I just wanted to say," she said softly, "I listened to your podcast. I didn't know it was you until today. You helped me leave someone who kept me small." I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her. Sometimes words ruin moments that are already perfect. When I got home that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the record player, and let an old jazz album fill the apartment. I sat there barefoot, half dancing in my chair, laughing at how absurdly peaceful it felt to be completely alone. For so long, I'd associated solitude with punishment. Now, it felt like a privilege. Around midnight, I got an email. This time, not from Chloe or anyone else from that life, but from Eric. The subject line read, "Thank you." I hesitated before opening it. "Lauren, I heard about what you did for the baby. I don't know how to say this without sounding pathetic, but I'm sorry for everything. I didn't just lose a marriage. I lost the only person who ever wanted the best for me. I hope you're happy. I mean that. I'm in therapy now, trying to fix what's left. I just wanted to say thank you for not being cruel, even when you had every reason to be." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not angry, not nostalgic, just finished. I didn't reply. Some chapters deserve silence as their ending. The next morning, I recorded what would unknowingly become the final episode of my podcast's first season. I titled it, "The Sound of Letting Go." Into the microphone, I said, "There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from winning or forgiving. It comes from understanding. I used to think revenge was about balance, but it's not. It's about control. The moment you stop needing to control how someone pays for hurting you, that's when you're free. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's indifference. It's waking up one day and realizing their choices don't orbit your life anymore. You're just free." I uploaded the episode, made tea, and sat by the window again. Outside, the lake shimmered under a gray sky. A small boat drifted across the water, slow and steady. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the quiet retaliation, the rebuilding, every version of myself that had to die so this one could live. I picked up my notebook and wrote one sentence. "Peace isn't something you find. It's something you decide to stop running from." Later that afternoon, Dana called. "You disappeared," she teased. "Just enjoying the quiet," I said. "You know," she said, "most people I work with after a divorce spend years angry. You got serene way too fast. You're starting to freak me out." I laughed. "I just ran out of energy for bitterness." She paused, then said softly, "You sound happy." "I am." After we hung up, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, the city lights glittered like new promises. Somewhere down the street, someone was laughing, and it didn't hurt to hear it. I thought about how far I'd come, not in miles, but in peace. The kind you can't buy, can't fake, can't borrow from anyone else. Inside, my phone buzzed again, notifications from listeners. Messages like, "This episode made me cry in the best way," and "You helped me finally leave." I smiled, closed the phone, and turned off the lights. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of rain on the balcony railing. I stood there a moment longer, letting the peace sink in, not as a prize, not as a lesson, but as a simple truth. Sometimes you win not by fighting, but by walking away and never looking back. And as the city softened under the rain, I realized something that had taken me years to understand: revenge ends when peace begins. I poured the last of my coffee, curled up on the couch, and let the night settle. The world, for once, didn't feel like something I had to survive. It just felt like something I could finally live in. Looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Every lie, every sleepless night, every quiet moment I thought would crush me, It all became the foundation for a better life. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't public or loud. It's peace. Real, earned, quiet peace. So if you're listening right now and you've ever been through a cheating story, or a husband betrayal that left you questioning everything, you're not alone. And if you love real-life revenge stories that end not in chaos, but in calm, then make sure to subscribe. This space is for anyone who's been broken and rebuilt, for those who know that the sweetest revenge is becoming untouchable, because at the end of every betrayal, there's always a woman who rises, and this time, it's you.